The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
They're all family. They're all related.
Right. And
the magic of the Spanish monarchy.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Rebecca Larson. On this show, we love to discuss women in history. For me, it's a way to finally get their stories out into the world, because for far too long, these women were just seen as afterthoughts or footnotes in history. So today, I am joined by Dr. Emma Cahill Marron to discuss one woman from history whose moniker needs to be debunked, Juana of Castile. Emma, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm so excited to talk to you about this lady. And I've been practicing on how to say her name, but I think I still sound very American.
You did it very, very well. Juana. It's like you have something in your throat, you're trying to get it out. Juana.
Yes. So if I say Juana, I apologize to you, but everybody else will understand.
You know, and it's true. Sometimes when you're speaking in a language, it's difficult to say things in a different language. I just do it so much now because I'm like, I let go. I just let go. Since I'm bilingual, I just let go and it happens. But it's true that it's difficult. It's difficult when you speak in English to then say out of the blue, Juana, but Juana it is. Juana Primera de Castilla.
It just sounds so beautiful when you say it. Well, I just want to start out by giving a little background because there might be people listening right now who have no idea who she is. And so I'll just say she was and if I get this wrong, please correct me. She was the third child of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, and the elder sister of Henry VIII's first wife, Katherine of Aragon. Okay, correct. I got that right.
This is a test today. You're getting tested. I was right, correct.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay, good. Well, one of the things that I kind of want to start with, and then I'm going to let you just kind of take the floor, is understanding her childhood and what it's like to be a princess of Spain. So, and she was the daughter of such powerful monarchs at the time. I am interested in knowing, what did her education look like?
That's a good question, because this is a very different generation of women in the Spanish court. And I say the Spanish court because it is at this time when these 4 girls and 1 boy are being raised by Isabella and Ferdinand, the 2 monarchs she mentioned. It's the first Spanish court because it's the beginning of that concept of Spain by the unification of Castile and Aragon. So in the case of Juana, she was born in 3rd place, and she was born right after her brother. Her brother, who was the heir, Juan. So Juan and Juana, right? Why? Because in the Spanish court, they were very devoted to Saint John, the evangelist. And so then that was their way to express that devotion by naming their children. The first one was named after her mother, Isabel. She was born in 1470, and she became by birth princess. And I'm going to say with that word, princess, instead of infanta. Then Juan was born in 1478, and then Juana was born right after that in 1479. So obviously it was a a very happy moment when she was born in Toledo, a very historical place in the crown of in Castile. And then she was born right after her brother. So it was a very happy moment because Isabel and Fernando had their heir, had Juan. So the birth of daughters meant that they could start a project to because they were thinking about forming alliances with foreign powers, like England they did with Katherine of Aragon. The birth of a daughter meant they had a daughter that could become a queen or married to someone in a foreign alliance, and then strengthening their power and their international bonds. So when she was born, it was a very happy moment. And think about this. The queen had a daughter in 1470, and then she didn't have another child until 1478. That was 8 years of angst, not having what they needed, which is a boy. And then they had the boy, and then three girls came in 1479, 1482, and then in 1485, the last one, Catherine of Aragon, the youngest. So Juana was brought up not to rule, but definitely in a way that she was going to become a queen in a foreign a consort in a foreign alliance. She didn't end up being a queen by marriage, but a queen in her own right. By marriage, she became the Archduchess of Austria. That's who she married. She married Philip of Austria.
So to prepare her for, well, let's just say, in England, it would be a queen consort or something like that. What kind of things did she have to study?
So, and this was your previous question. I just thought, given a bit of context, let's go into her specific education as an infanta, and this is where I'll explain the difference. So, in the case of the eldest, she's princess from birth because she is the heiress to Isabella at that moment until her brother is born, and then the boy becomes the Prince of Asturias. Like there is a Prince of Wales in England, there is a Prince of Asturias in the Spanish monarchy. Then Juana is born after that, and so she's an infanta. An infanta is just a way to say a Spanish princess, but it's a specific name to the princesses in Spain, so we use that. In the case of the eldest, she was Princess of Asturias because she had the title, like Princess of Wales, it is in England, right? Juana was educated, first of all, she's born into a court where her mother is learning Latin at the time. She's learning things that she wasn't educated in when she was a child because Isabel of Castile didn't grow up in the Castilian court of her brother Henry IV, her half brother. She grew up with her mother in a very Portuguese court in Arevalo, which was a city that belonged to her mother in her dower. It was a city that belonged to her. So she grew up there with her brother Alfonso, and her brother would have become the king in any case. So Isabella wasn't also meant to rule. But in the case of Juana, she's born in a time where Isabella is already a queen and becoming very powerful. Isabella and Ferdinand are becoming very powerful, and the queen has embarked herself in not letting others rule for her, but learn things like Latin and learn how to talk to diplomats, how to negotiate all these alliances. She's implicated in all the negotiations. She writes letters to the ambassadors. She's not a queen that sits back and lets Ferdinand do his thing. She's ruling. So this is what the daughters see when they're growing up. And then for the first time in the history of Castile, the queen decides that her daughters are going to be educated formally with a tutor. Like we would go to a school. In this case, it's just homeschooling, right? But they had other children at the court that they were learning with. The brother had a separate household, so he learned with other boys in court, a bit like Arthur Tudor did in Ludlow. And then the sisters were the younger sisters, the three younger sisters usually studied together. More Juana, is Maria, the fourth one, and Catherine, Catalina more together. Juana also, her tutor was different. Her tutor was a Dominican friar called Antonio de Miranda. And in the case of Catherine and Mary, they had an Italian tutor called Alexandro Geraldini. So they learned Latin, like their mother was learning. And there was a very famous woman that Isabella brought to court called Beatriz Galindo, known as the Latinist. There's a whole neighborhood in Madrid named after this woman because she was a specialist in Latin, a woman who specialized in Latin. Imagine, and so the queen brought her to court so she could talk to her daughters and the other ladies. So they all learned Latin with the queen. Isabella of Castile was one of these people who were always thought, well, I'm going to do this, so everybody needs to follow my lead. So she basically that's and the girls thrived in that kind of atmosphere for many years when they were children. Juana was especially inclined to music. She played the clavichord, which is a type of like early piano. There's a depiction of all the girls and the boy in the Prado Museum. It's a 19th century painting, but it's a representation of the queen overseeing their education, and you can see that music is present. And Juana was a very intelligent child. All the daughters of Isabel and Ferdinand were intelligent, and I think more than intelligent, they were just educated. They were educated, and they saw a lot from their mother, so they were just getting used to seeing women in charge and taking charge. And when there's a queen regnant, there's a whole household of women behind her. It's not just a queen. It's a very feminine kind of ambiance and very interlinked to power, and how Isabella just was becoming iconic too during her lifetime even. So I think it both gave her a lot of self-confidence, but I think it also made it very difficult for Juana when she ended up being her heiress, because it was a lot of to live up to, right? If your mom is Isabel of Castile, imagine that. No pressure.
I can't even imagine, because if you think of England at the same time, there was no thought of having a queen regnant,
Right.
and then here
Exactly.
we are. Across the ocean, there's this woman who's ruling on her own, and she is educating herself and educating her children. Likewise,
Yes.
that's just seems so empowering.
And then funding people like Columbus, because it was the Queen who really funded Columbus, just doing incredible things. And I think she was also a very I don't think she was definitely an easy person to deal with, Isabella of Castile. So I think depended a lot on your personality type. And when you have 5 children, obviously they're not all going to be the same, right? For
Right.
example, we know her daughter Catherine was very similar to her, both physically and in character. But in the case of Juana, well, first she didn't look very much like her mom. She looked different. They all looked like each other, obviously, but she had dark eyes, darker hair. And even there's an ambassador once that meets Katherine of Aragon. He's from Venice, I think. Yes, and no, he's an ambassador of Margaret of Austria, and he comes when there's going to be a painting painted of Mary Tudor Rose, Mary Rose Tudor. He talks about meeting Katherine of Aragon, saying, "Oh, it was incredible how much the Queen looks like her mother, Isabel of Castile, and how different she is in character and presence to her sister Juana." So people are meeting these women, and even though they're family, they're realizing they're very different, not only physically but in character, which I think is very important. And that brings us down to the question of why did Juana have such a hard time becoming queen? Because she never actually she ruled a little bit, but not very much, and then she was imprisoned for the rest of her life in 1509, and she lived until 1555.
Wow.
So it's incredible. What you think about it, the 2 sisters were imprisoned. Catherine of Aragon was also imprisoned in the last part of her life. So at one point, those 2 queens, sister queens, were imprisoned by very unfair men. I said it.
Right. When you look at it as an outsider and, in modern time, we can clearly just see that they were threatened by these women.
Exactly. Thank you, Rebecca. This is why I love this show.
Well, it's obvious when we look at it now, they were clearly a threat to these men and the power that they wanted to hold.
Exactly. They were raised to know that they were women. So they it is a time where women do not have the same rights, consideration. Some scholars even defend that they're not even fit to rule. They're not even smart enough. But there's a debate here called around this time, a previous time, but this time is coming up again with humanism, called the Querelle de Femmes, which is really a debate whether women have the capacity to rule and to do the things that men do in a way. Someone who started this was Christine de Pizan, a very famous medieval scholar who defended women in her very famous book about the city of ladies. And so there's a lot of recurring debates whether women can rule or not. And I think this is very interesting in the case of Juana. There's a very famous book by Bethany Aram called Juana the Mad, Sovereignty and Dynasty in Renaissance Europe, that was written in 2001, where she talks about this and how it is different in the case of Juana than other ruling women, like, for example, Elizabeth I in England, who, or Isabel of Castile, her own mother. And she talks a lot about how not only during their time, but afterwards, these women who were successful rulers were compared to men and thought to have manly qualities, something that was said about Catherine of Aragon too. So it was praised to say that a woman was like a man, right? And in the case of women like Juana, the opposite. Like, she's crazy because she's a woman and she's gone crazy. And the cruel thing about Juana is the belief is that she went crazy for a guy. She was crazy in love, so she was crazy. Which is very unfair because if you think about it, Philip did a lot of bad things to her. So we should think about more as being a victim of abuse than someone who went mad because she loved him very much. She went mad because he treated her very poorly. That's why she had bouts of depression, I think, and probably the mistreatment had to do a lot with having a problem that came out of being severely mistreated. I think another woman that has been mistreated like that way is Mary Tudor, Mary the First of England, who was mistreated greatly and then thought to be very harsh and this and that. Oh, what are we talking about? We would never judge a man like that, would we? And in the case of the women, I mean, there's been mad kings too. None of them, I think, were imprisoned. It's a very famous mad king of Spain, and he was never imprisoned. You know,
it reminds me a little bit of, I think it's Charles VI of France, the king who thought he was made of glass.
Oh, I've never heard of this guy, but now I want to know more.
He was actually the father of Catherine of Valois, who married Henry V. And so it's a very interesting story because then Catherine's son, Henry VI, had some mental illness of his own. But yeah, I mean, they never locked him away in a prison. You know, maybe they hid him away and other people were ruling, but it wasn't like he was locked away. I want to go back a little bit and let's start from the beginning with Juana and her husband and how this all played out, because she became Queen of Castile after her mother's death.
Yes.
And how long did it take? Like, she was Queen of Castile. How long was it before Philip came in and was like, oh, no, honey, you can't do this job?
Right. Yeah. So Juana and Philip were married in 1496. She traveled to Flanders and she married him, and she became Archduchess of Austria, and that's what they were. But then very soon in the Spanish royal family, people start dying left and right. So her sister dies, her little baby who becomes a little boy dies, her brother dies before her sister dies. Yeah. Yes, it's hard. It's a lot of people. So and the queen, Isabel of Castile, loses two children and a grandson and starts to decline rapidly too. She's aging, obviously, and she's had a hard life. So Juana and Philip come to Castile to be sworn princes of Asturias. So they become heirs before she becomes queen. And the whole problem starts there. It's Philip always wanting the whole power. So the problem, and this book that I was telling about, Bethany Aram explains it very well. It's that in Castile, Juana is the reina propietaria, and that cannot be taken away because her mom has said the president that a woman can own, which is propietaria means owning. In English, we say queen regnant, a queen that rules. In Spanish, we say a queen that owns the kingdom, right?
Okay.
Philip could not take that away, and it's always his. Since then, he's always trying to have the full power, to become the king in his own right. And there is a tension because obviously you have to think that he's a foreigner in Castile.
Mm-hmm.
Juana was born in Castile, raised in Castile. So she was popular, and she was the daughter of Isabella of Castile. So when and then the other thing with Juana is something that this book explains very well. She's very successful in the sense that she has 6 children very quickly, with somewhat not any problem. So first she has Eleanor, and they all become, so her 2 sons become emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V and Ferdinand I, and her 4 daughters become queens too. So in that sense, she was they were a very successful couple because they have many children. But the marital problem starts soon because Philip, and this happens with Katherine of Aragon too, and this is where I want to talk about the sisters too. When they fall pregnant, usually the men find mistresses.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when Juana starts to have trouble with Philip, lots of trouble, because she is obviously not happy about it. But the first time that this happens between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, there's also a big problem with the Duke of Buckingham. And Catherine expresses her grief in public, and the king is really embarrassed, Henry VIII, and she never does it again. Mm-hmm. So I think this is where Juana and Catherine were very different. Did it hurt less for Catherine in the subsequent? No. It's just a matter of deciding what your attitude is going to be towards it and how to probably get the things you want. I think in Juana's case, she just didn't have the same personality as her mother, who was very much like Catherine of Aragon, probably was more like her father, probably was more someone who just couldn't keep quiet when something was not fair. I can relate to that.
I can relate to that too. But
right? But it makes sense. Doesn't it make sense for a guy? It's okay to do that, but not for a queen who has to be, even if she became the queen, and she did eventually, and he became king with her. And this whole king consort thing is very controversial. He actually was a king, and like Ferdinand was in Castile during Isabella's time. Mm-hmm. He was a full king. He did, but the only thing they didn't have, which was the most important, is they couldn't transmit those things to their children. She was the one who transmitted her royal powers in Castile to Charles V, their son right. Who became king of everything, and emperor of the Holy Roman Empire.
I'm seeing so many similarities right now between this story and Mary I and Philip.
Well, yes, exactly. And then you have to think that these are descendants of Juana. They're all family. They're all related.
Right. And
the magic of the Spanish monarchy.
I think about how the English subjects or the English nobility were so worried about Philip wanting to be king, not king consort, but king, and how they would not allow that to be the case. And it makes me wonder if it's because of what they had seen in Spain, or if they were just so worried about, I don't know. I guess I've never really thought about it too much before. What do you think?
I think that it's because this foreign king brings foreigners that want things and mingles in their international affairs, and if a foreign king means a new dynasty and a new house ruling. So nobody wants that. Nobody wants your house to end. And so Philip arrived with a lot of people that needed to be fed, that needed to have their interests grown. And his network was not just going to be like, they were going to get money from England. And that's the way that's the way kings used also their kingdoms. Philip was made king of Naples to become king of England, so he would marry on the same status as Mary, but he didn't have the same status as Mary. She was the Queen of England and Ireland. I mean, she was the powerful one in that dynamic. But think about this. It's been so unfair the way they've been treated because they say he left her and to die alone, and this is not true. He was just defending his interests in Europe, and right. He always showed respect for her, always showed affection for her. There were, and I think we have to remember that love is never a question here. Like, not even with Isabel and Ferdinand, I don't think they were in love. I don't think people knew what being in love was back in the day. I think there was affection and sense of duty and affinity. And I think Mary Tudor and Philip of Habsburg had affinity and constructed in a very short time. If you think about their image of power, the propaganda that they did together, it was very similar to Isabella and Ferdinand. Peter Stifel has studied this a lot, and they were modeling after them, so they were trying to have a future together, and they were trying to have heirs. So I think it's just a matter of when it's a ruling queen, there's always judgment on her side. She always falls in love too much, or is too crazy and has fantasy pregnancies. Because I want to ask these people who talk about Mary the First fantasy pregnancies if they have access to their records of her gynecologist, because I'm not quite sure how they make diagnosis like that about someone from the 16th century. I'm very intrigued.
I'm intrigued by that too. Now that you say, I think sometimes it's just so easy to take the word of people like, oh, well, they clearly know.
I think you're quite right, Rebecca. I think somebody said it once and it just gets right. repeated.
Yeah,
but I don't think that person was a gynecologist or treated Mary Tudor for her phantom pregnancy. So I'm going to take that, with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So we see the similarities with women rulers. And, we talk
judgment
and judgment. It's no different today. I don't want to get all political, but, here in the United States, God forbid, if we have a female president, she's too emotional.
Oh, yes. Let's not go into the political scene in the U.S. right now, because I'm going to start crying.
I just wanted to, here we are hundreds of years later, and we're still having the same issues, even though back then women were ruling and they were ruling successfully. Somehow we can't learn from history.
Well, I can't run for president of the United States because first of all, I'm not a citizen yet, but you can. So I would vote for you.
Well, thank you. I'm not running.
Oh, geez. We have to put up with those two guys? I can't believe it.
Right.
They should be retired, having a good life.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
we need fresh blood.
Let's get back to Juana.
Oh, yes. That's much better.
I'm just going to keep saying it. Juana.
That's very good, actually. I think you got it.
I want to talk a little bit about 1506. And Juana and Philip's trip to England.
Yes.
Can we talk about that? What brought them there? What happened? Tell us all about it.
So what brought them there? Bad weather. Really bad weather. I talk about this a lot, and we have to remember. So when they went to be sworn as heirs, they went through France. And that's when they met with Louis XII, and he said, oh, what a handsome prince this is. And then Philip has been known ever since as Philip the Handsome, and Juana as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad, which is, you can't get any, the patriarchy strikes back, right?
Yes.
But in the case of the 1506, they decided to go when Isabel has died, Isabella of Castile. My cat is about to make an appearance in...
Ooh.
Yeah, my cat Mafala. In 1506, when they're going to Castile to become king and queen of Castile, they go by sea, and there's a big storm, and they end up in England, which this was common. It is not the first time. It was not the first time that happened to Juana. And there's a very good story about when this happens, and their boat is about to sink, and Philip is crying like a little baby. And Juana just does a Titanic moment and just is like, don't worry, I've never heard of a queen drowning. So Juana has a moment there of really bravery when she's like she's the one that to keep calm and steady in that moment when Philip is just wilting under pressure. But I mean, I would, because imagine you thinking you're going to drown. So then they arrive and they spend like a month in England, and Henry the Seventh welcomes them, and this is the only time that Juana ever sees another one of her siblings, if you think about it.
Wow.
Because she meets with Catherine, but very briefly. Philip doesn't want her to spend time with her sister because he's a cruel person, just like Henry the Eighth was. He doesn't allow them to be together for a long time. They do meet in Windsor Castle. And then Philip and Henry travel around a little bit, and he shows him his palaces, and Philip says he's really impressed. And then later, when they leave the court, and in this case, it's really interesting when they're in one of the receptions and an audience with the king, and Philip is there, and Catherine too. Catherine invites Philip to dance, and he says no. And the reason for this is because at this same time, Katherine of Aragon is already an ambassadress of the Spanish monarchy, and she's defending Ferdinand of Aragon's interests in England against Philip of Habsburg, who had been plotting against Ferdinand, especially with the people in Catherine's English household. And this became known by the Spanish ambassador, and he told Catherine, and she took action. So this is why when Philip arrives, he's like, I don't want to do anything with you. You're plotting against me. And she's like, well, I'm still gonna dance because I'm the best ambassadress of the world. So and this happens. And then when they leave and they go to Spain, Philip dies very quickly. They take power, but Philip dies very quickly in very suspicious circumstances right after Ferdinand of Aragon leaves. So the rumor was that Ferdinand of Aragon poisoned Philip of Habsburg.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This makes sense, to be honest. As somebody who's only vaguely studied this history, I know that Ferdinand wanted his daughter's throne. And what better way than to get his son-in-law out of the way?
He was annoying. He wasn't letting him do his thing, which was Ferdinand knew he couldn't have Castile for himself because of what we've talked about her. He knew his daughter was reina propietaria, but he knew he could manipulate her and use her. And she had a son. Charles had already been born, so he thought, I'll get him out of the picture. That's what I think. I don't know. So in this case, after this happens, Juana really, obviously, if your husband dies in very suspicious circumstances and people are saying your dad killed him, you might go through a little bit of a bad time, don't you think? So she does. This is where all the legend of Juana starts, because she doesn't want to be far away from his body, and they start a whole procession because Philip had left in his will that he wanted to be buried in Granada, and they were in Burgos, so that's a long distance to go from Burgos to Granada. So they start going south in this procession that only travels at night. And for months they're traveling. She's pregnant, And then she ends up having their daughter after his death. And she names her Catherine after her sister.
Oh, wow.
And this is when her sister starts to try to bring her to England to marry Henry VII. Isn't that just incredible?
Oh, see, that's a connection I don't think I knew existed there.
There you go. Yes. So Catherine of Aragon is trying to find a new wife for Henry VII to try to strengthen her own marriage because since her mother died, she wasn't as important because she wasn't the daughter of the Queen of Castile anymore. So she tries to bring Juana to marry Henry VII. But that doesn't work out because Ferdinand doesn't want to let go of Juana. She's too precious. She's the queen. And finally, what happens is he imprisons her in 1509, the year that Catherine of Aragon becomes Queen of England.
Yeah.
Juana of Castile is imprisoned in Tordesillas forever with her daughter, with her little daughter, Catherine. Yeah.
It's just sad.
It's extremely sad. She gets visits from her relatives occasionally, usually to get something from her. The only time that she becomes quite relevant, but is in 1520 when a movement called Comuneros, it was a revolt against the rule of Charles of Habsburg because he was a foreigner. Let's remember he was brought up by Margaret of Austria. So when he became king of Spain, he didn't even know Spanish. He had never visited Spain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have to remember this. So the Comuneros go to Tordesillas where the queen is imprisoned and they try to force her to support a rule of her own rule against her son. And for all the madness that people have claimed, Juana does not cave and does not sign anything against her son. So this has been an argument also used by Aram and other authors to say that, you know, a mad person would have had a different attitude probably towards this. Maybe she just didn't want to rule. And that's I think, one of the main there was a biography of Juana published last year by a Spanish historian. It's like a psychobiography, like a psychological biography. And because she's such a, she's been studied in more from that perspective, obviously. One of her claims is that maybe she didn't want to rule. Maybe she didn't have the interest in doing that. Right. But she still didn't go against the interests of her son, which would have been, if she was that mad and she had been imprisoned for so long, maybe you'd think someone would have a different reaction than to protect your son and his dynastic rights. So yeah, she's a very interesting figure. I don't really think she was mad. I think she probably had bouts of depression and other historians like Miguel Ángel Zalama, who studies a lot her artistic influence in Spain, claims that she might have had schizophrenia or some sort of condition, mental health condition, which is typical and normal even nowadays. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. But we didn't have a psychiatrist there, so we don't know.
Right. You mentioned her artistic influence. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, so Juana, because she inherits the crown, she inherits the treasure and a lot of things. And she has also, think about this, she goes and becomes Archduchess of Austria, and she goes to the Low Countries where art is flourishing, and she buys things like tapestries. She had a very, very fine tapestry collection. This was published we published a book 3 years ago in Arte, Poder y Género about Isabel of Castile and her daughters, and one of the articles talks about this magnificent tapestry collection that she had. Miguel Ángel Zalama, who I've mentioned before, also talks about how this became part of Catherine of Austria, her daughter's dowry. So it spreads to Portugal and other places. So she's influential in the dissemination of Netherlandish art in Castile. She's responsible for that because her daughters inherit a lot of these pieces too. My co-worker Melania Soler Moraton has worked on this, and last year the year before, an article on she becomes a very iconic figure because of her portraits and images, devotional images, where she is a donor, and these are done by leading leading Netherlandish artists. Her manuscripts, illuminated manuscripts, are very famous. There's a very famous one in the British Library known as the Hours of Juana of Castile, because it has her portraits and her coats of arms. And listen to this, another connection with Katherine of Aragon. This manuscript that is in the British Library, and now finally we can access the catalog again, I think, it was illuminated by Gerard Horenboot, Susanna Horenboot's father. Oh yeah. Gerard Horenboot, who ended up working for Henry VIII, migrating to England. So this was part of my dissertation when I studied that transfer of these artists from Flanders to England, and how Catherine had already known their art for decades, because her sisters and her mom were commissioning these manuscripts done by the artists of Margaret of Austria in Flanders. Isn't this incredible? This is why Juana is so important. She owned also portraits of Katherine of Aragon. She had several portraits of Katherine of Aragon, yes, as Princess of Wales. So I think those portraits that we were talking about in your other show and the other episode, these were the portraits that Juana could have had, because her things, her possessions that went to her daughters. And this has been studied by Melania Soler Moraton. So a lot more will come in the near future about that dissemination of all her artistic pieces into the women that became the powerful women in the second half of the 16th century in the Spanish monarchy.
Wow. And you said Katherine of Aragon and her daughter Mary had somebody come and teach them how to paint, I think, in the last episode. Do we know if Juana...
Oh, you picked on that?
I thought that was fascinating. That was something I had never heard before. Was this something that her sister was learning as well? Or while she was imprisoned, was she painting? Or do we know what she was doing?
Oh, this is a really good question, because you would have to read Miguel Ángel Falama. He has several books that talk about her everyday life. There's one in open access we can share. It is in Spanish, so everybody's going to be practicing some Spanish this year. But I think it's called Vida Cotidiana, and it's, her daily life. And we know about times when they visit her and how they take away things. And Charles V especially did that. So yes, we do have a lot of information on that, but it's in Spanish. It's published in Spanish. I never heard of her painting per se, but this is why I suggested this, is because I kept thinking about what would have been Susanna Horenboot's role in the court of Catherine of Aragon. And because later on, and this brings us back to Philip and Mary, Philip, when he goes back to Spain after Mary Tudor dies, he has Sofonisba Anguissola, his wife, Elizabeth of Valois, has Sofonisba Anguissola in her court painting for them. And because of all the work that has been done in this artist, I thought that makes sense that Joanna would have been there to do the same for Mary, who was being raised as a Renaissance princess. She has all these manuals being commissioned by Queen Catherine to educate her, and in many of these manuals, the humanists reference painting and tapestries, and we know Catherine of Aragon, like I said, was painting coats of arms and pendants and things. So it just makes total sense to me. That you would bring a Flemish young woman, like Catherine had La Latina to teach her Latin. You would bring a Flemish young woman to teach her daughter how to paint, because think about what Melanie said, that she wouldn't have needed to be chaperoned because she was a woman, right?
Right.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
It does.
You're teaching someone how to paint. I'm not an expert in painting, but you close, It's not something. So I think that makes total sense to me, that you would bring a whole family, not just Susanna, the whole family, and the men would run the workshop, because we know Susanna Horenboot's mother was involved, and we know that it was the women who delivered the illuminated manuscripts by Henry VIII's accounts sometimes. this is all work in progress, though, but it's so exciting.
Right. Wow. I feel like we've covered so much about her today, but there's still more to uncover. I'm just glad to introduce her maybe a little more clearly to the listeners and help them see a different side of her, that she wasn't the mad. There was more to this woman.
Yes, there was definitely more. It's very unfair. Charles V had bouts of depression and ended up leaving court and abdicating. So, and we don't call him Charles the Mad. So I think, yes, I think we should just call her Juana Primera de Castilla, so Joanna the First, and then explain what happened to her, what we know happened to her. And that's how I think these monikers sometimes are great, and sometimes why is it always that the women get the worst ones, right? Don't you think?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder why.
We don't need to wonder. We really know.
Oh, we know. Everybody knows.
Well, Emma, do you want to leave the listeners with any last thought on Juana?
Oh, she's a great historical figure. She needs a lot more attention in a positive way. I think female historians are doing a great job, so this is a shout out to them. And I know somebody's interesting when I want to learn more and more about them. And as I was preparing for this episode, I was just like, I'm so focused on Katherine of Aragon, I forget how interesting her sisters are, you know? And going back to this book that we published in 2020 in Arte, Poder y Género, it's just it was so unknown before this book, and now it seems like there's so many open avenues to keep studying these women that it's just incredible. So anyone who wants to start anything on the daughters of Isabel of Castile, they're fascinating. So come to us, Arte, Poder y Género, and we'll get you started.
I love it. Emma, thank you so much for coming back on the show today and talking to me about this fascinating woman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Tudors Dynasty Podcast. You can follow and support the Tudors Dynasty Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon @Tudors Dynasty.